G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Welcome. I feel like saying good morning because it's morning here. It's very morning here, in fact. And yeah, it's great to join you and talk about improving our drawing. How do we improve our drawing? How do I get rid of my croaky voice? I'm afraid you're the first people I've spoken to this morning, so it might just take me a minute to settle things down. So just wait till that happens. I'll just jabber on and warm things up. So, thanks for joining. Lucky first person there. Please let me know in the chat where you're watching from. I find that very interesting. Drawing improvement. It's something, if we're learning to draw, we all want. We all want to, g'day there, better cat. It's something we all want to be able to do. For most of us, improving is something that is part of our hope for our drawing, for our expectation. It's always easier. G'day, Mia. Florida, it's always easier to find people who we think are drawing better than us. And sometimes that's probably true. Sometimes perhaps it's just that they're drawing different and we really like their style. But wanting to improve is a natural part really of any skill that we pick up, and particularly creative ones. And I think even more so drawing, because the difference between drawing and a lot of creative things is that what we do is always there. If I sing, when I stop singing, it's not there. If I play an instrument, when I stop playing, it's not happening. We can't hear it. But if I draw, we have a bit of paper to look at afterwards that we can look at and think about and respond to and compare with other things we've done, with other things other people have done, and with where we were hoping to go with that drawing. So, for all sorts of reasons, drawing has its particular challenges in terms of our self esteem. And I was thinking as I sat down this morning, what are the reasons that I think my drawing has improved? Because I think it has. And that's not saying there was anything wrong with it at the start. Okay. When we say we want our drawing to improve, we're not saying, oh, our drawing at this point is rubbish. Not at all. But we're saying there's further we can go. And let me just say up front, our imagination, our thinking ability will always take us beyond what we're able to do. That's part of being creative. That's part of the creative thinking. It can run ahead to perhaps places we will never get to, perhaps places that no one could ever get to, perhaps places that are actually impossible to really to draw, but we can imagine them in some multi-dimensional way. So let's firstly go a bit easy on ourselves. Our mind will always take us to places that we can't get to or we can't get to now. That doesn't mean, though, we can't improve. And we should see that as an encouraging thing because it's very hard to go where our mind hasn't gone. If I can't see anything wrong with what I'm doing now, if I think I've gone as far as can ever be gone in drawing ability, well, I'm not going to improve because I'm not going to see the space to improve in. So all of these things are part of the journey. So don't let the issue of drawing improvement be a discouragement, but equally, it's exciting to see development in our drawing. And that might be a better word. It probably is a better word for some of us to use because it's not such a judgmental word and it feels more natural. But can I say the drawing improvement is not necessarily a natural result from drawing? We can draw and not improve. And by not improve, I mean not change in our drawing. That our drawings that we're doing now look pretty much as if they were done in the same session as the drawings we did a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So drawing is also improvement is not automatic. And that's a big mistake that we can make at the start. We think, well, if I just keep drawing, I will improve. That somehow, yeah, it is natural. So, remember the Austin, Texas urban sketches? That's great, Lauren. That's absolutely great. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. It's probably, I don't know, is it evening in Texas? Um, Rolf, g'day. Welcome to you too. Where are you from, Rolf? And well, I enjoy sharing my knowledge. Um, I discover with these YouTube videos, I'm pretty much a teacher inside as I am an artist. So these videos have been a great sweet spot, a great sort of coming together of my internal universes. Um, Wisconsin, okay, go Pack, go. I assume that's some reference to American football. But look, the first thing, if we want to improve in drawing, is we have to pay the price. Now, the price we pay is different for each of us because what we need to do to improve and how hard that's going to be will be different for each of us. And so there is a different price to pay. But improvement, I'm going to say, never comes without intention. It never comes without trying to improve. There may be the very odd person where it's all so much fun and enjoyment that they're doing all the things you need to do to improve without actually consciously doing them. And so it might seem like it's just automatic, but for those very few people, they're just living in a very favored place. But for most of us, improvement is, at least in part, a more intentional process. And so, therefore, it is work to improve. It is work and effort to improve that goes beyond when I'm actually holding the pen in my hand and putting ink or whatever on the paper. So, there is a price. It's easier to keep going as I'm doing without having to take on the responsibility and sometimes the psychological burden of trying to improve. Oh, Steve is all for the Seattle Mariners. So, yeah, if you're watching from somewhere else in the States and you've got a team that's not the, what is it, the Pack or the Mariners, then let us know. Give us a little taste of American culture for those of us elsewhere in the world. So, and improvement can be very hard because there can be a lot of, as I said, internal things to overcome. And at the very start, you might have missed it. I said one of the issues with drawing is that when we finish, the drawing is there. And if I'm learning to sing or to play an instrument, when I finish the session, it's gone and it doesn't start again till I start again. But I can look at my drawing the next day, the day after, and I can, if you like, judge myself on it. I can score my ability. I can score, you know, whether I think I've improved or whether I think I'm any good. I can score whether I'm a worthwhile person based on my drawing if I want to. I mean, it's a pretty destructive thing to do, but I can do it still. There are challenges by having the drawing survive after the, if you like, skill development, the learning session has finished. But there's also tremendous opportunities in that too. And what we need to do is find the opportunities to improve and to pull back from the perhaps more self-destructive elements of drawing that some of us may go through. Because for me, one of the big things I had to overcome was fear of failing, fear that I wouldn't be as good as I hoped I might be, or I thought I might be, or as sometimes other people said I would be if I actually drew. And that can be a big deal. It doesn't sound a big deal now, probably. And because I've been drawing and I've done so many drawings now, it's easy to think, oh, that's not such a big deal. But let me tell you, it stopped me drawing for 30 years, stopped me doing any art really for 30 years, which is longer than many of you have been alive. And certainly longer than most of you watching this have been adults. So it actually was a big deal. So I mean, another little just side thought there. It's important that we don't think that just because we don't see other people's internal struggles with their art, whatever sort of art it is, that they don't have it and it's easy for them. No, some people are just better at not showing things or at not letting things ever even come on the conversational agenda. So, yeah, don't make those assumptions about people, because when we do, often subtly what we're doing is we're somehow saying that it's easier for them and therefore it's harder for me. And therefore, either I'm not going to be able to overcome this because it's more than what they have to face, or we're kind of giving ourselves an excuse to not do the work that at a deeper level we do want to do, to not address the fear or whatever it is that's stopping us. So um and the another part of the price is simply the work. Sometimes people want to do well in something, but we don't want to actually put in the effort. We somehow feel that it should just come easier. Tips for drawing things without a reference. Look, it's harder. I would say don't try and draw things without a reference until you've learnt to draw them well with references, because there really is no such thing as drawing without a reference. It's just whether the reference is in front of us in life or with a photo, or whether we're using a memory of a photo or the object in front of us. We have to know what we're drawing or we can't draw it. We can't draw things that have no meaning to us. We have to have a picture of what we want. And where does that picture come from? It comes from seeing things. So the trouble with people drawing from imagination, particularly if they start doing it early on, is that they haven't taken on board enough reference images to rummage through and find ones that are the, if you like, the particular viewing position, angle, size, type of thing that they want to draw. So they end up then pulling together a whole lot of memories of this particular object or scene that don't quite go together or simply don't quite get drawn correctly. And where there's a lot of guessing involved to sort of fill the gaps between accurate memories and inaccurate so what we have to do is, I think about in for this drawing from imagination, is our brain has been like a big filing cabinet drawer, and we put the files away when we collect them of things that we want to draw, and then we rummage through them to find the ones we want to then draw from imagination. And the more files I put in and that I've got to rummage through, the greater chance I've got of actually having all the information I need for the drawing from the imagination that I want to draw. G'day, Jay from Belgium. Oh, we had a fantastic couple of days in Ghent, my wife and I. We were in Belgium when Belgium played Russia in the World Cup in 2018. Yeah, we were above a pub, staying above a pub. It was a noisy night. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and beautiful. I wish I could. I wasn't really drawing then. I wish I could go back and draw Ghent and well, Belgium in general. I hope you take advantage of the fact that there's so much to draw there. So it takes effort, it takes consistency, takes work, takes discipline, it takes overcoming fears that may stop us from trying, that may stop us from taking risks. So but for me, what are the from India? Welcome, Prisha. For me though, I worked out 6 things this morning with a cup of tea. Why at this point in my drawing journey, and I've been drawing seriously for 4 years, what has led to improvement. And if you look at the thumbnail for this, I found one of my very first YouTube video drawings and my very last one, which I did a couple of days ago. It's Monday, very early Monday morning. Well, 7:30, 7:45. That's very early for me. It's early Monday morning here. I drew this on Friday. So this is the one. This isn't actually the one in the thumbnail. I couldn't find that this morning. But this is a very early, one of my first YouTube drawings. Now, I like a lot of things about it. But there's, as a drawing, there's a very strong emphasis on outline and kind of architectural accuracy. I've been trying to draw things as precisely as I could in terms of the shapes. And besides the fact that it's a lot smaller, this is the most recent drawing. So there are lots of similarities, but I think they look quite different to look at them. So there's 4 years difference between the two. Thanks, Prisha. There's 4 years difference and lots of drawings, maybe 1,000 drawings or more in those 4 years um, between the two. And so sometimes what we think of improvement really is development, because it's not so much that there are problems with that first drawing in lots of ways, except that I was aiming for more. I was trying to consciously achieve more last Friday when I drew the second one. But that came from experience and practice and developing my thinking, because our drawing comes from our thinking. Our drawing comes from our understanding. The what I do with this, if my brain isn't giving directions, this ain't doing nothing. It's just, it's doing what it's doing now. Um, my thought processes, my understanding of what drawing is and what I'm trying to do right now is what directs me. Now, perhaps I may or may not achieve with this. I may not be able to get it from here through here onto here, but at least I know what I'm aiming for, and I'm not just wandering around. Um, so so the number one thing I said, I thought that has absolutely transformed my drawing. This is the big one. That's why I put it first. The thing that has had more impact on how my drawings look and my ability to achieve the effects I have has come from developing my understanding of what drawing is. And in a nutshell, when I drew this, I thought the aim of my drawing really was to accurately copy what I saw. And that's what I say is perhaps an inadequate way of thinking about it. But 4 years ago, when I began making YouTube how to draw videos, that's what I was trying to do, which is why I'm fairly confident it's what many of us are trying to do. And it's certainly what we try and do when we're younger, when we start to learn to draw as kids, or we just start drawing. We're not even trying to learn to draw, we're just drawing. So that's, and at some point though, and particularly through my drawing of trees, because although I was primarily drawing architecture, there were always trees around. And I had painted trees for 10 years before I started drawing oil painting of trees. So I I found that as I thought, how am I going to draw the leaves? Because I can't draw all the leaves. And I yeah, and I wanted the trees to look more realistic. Um, and I began to realize, well, I can't draw the leaves. I'm trying to draw how all the leaves look together. So I'm really trying to draw the effect of leaves. Yeah. Dude, I'll answer your question when I finish this point. Okay. So don't go away. Um, how am I going to, it's more capturing the effect of all the leaves at once. And from there, I began to think, well, it's really about capturing the effect of the whole tree. And then there was lots of other foliage stuff and yeah, capturing the effect. And then I realized that if there was a crowd of people, the people at the back, I wasn't even trying to draw them. I was trying to capture the effect of a crowd of people. And I began to realize that, well, in fact, all the time I'm trying to capture the effect of what I see, because it's not just the dimensions of the objects and the edges of the objects from the angle I'm at, but it is things such as the surface material, the condition of the object, the lighting, how far the object is from us, and all these things affect how we see it. And so as I began to get a more complex, I suppose, understanding of the drawing process, I now was more challenged but with direction, to find ways of capturing all of those effects. And so initially, I used to think of distance as being a separate thing. Well, now I think of distance as just being another effect because, in effect, what I'd done was I'd worked out how do I find marks with a pen to give the feeling, the effect that this is closer than that. And I realized that I'd worked out 3 or 4 ways of making things look and feel closer. I mean, because in reality, there is nothing on this sheet of paper that's closer to me than anything else. The cathedral at the end of the street that in the hot sun is pretty washed out and we don't see that well. Um, the ink for that is just as close to my eyes as the ink for the very closest bit of detail in the bottom left corner. So it's not making it closer, but it's making it feel closer, visually feel closer to us by how I control my pen and put the ink on the paper. And I was more aware of doing that for distance and for foliage at the start. And then I realized it was really the same thing. And then I realized that's how it is for everything. And so instead of trying to outline shapes as my goal, that becomes one of the things I do and one of the things I combine with other things to create a realistic feeling in what I draw. How do we draw something that looks real? Because again, this is not a street in Florence. It's a sheet of paper in Australia with black ink on it. So I'm not creating the reality. And I can't even, this is three-dimensional and, all of that. I'm trying to have it look like it feels like it's real. It captures enough of what we see and feel when we're there that it echoes on this flat two-dimensional sheet of paper. And I only have ink to do that. So what marks can I put on the paper and how can I combine them to echo reality in what I draw? That's the challenge. And the other way, or what I combined with that sort of finding effects to capture a sense of visually how things look in life, is that's a translation process. So again, I'm not copying anything because I can't. I'm trying to find marks on the paper with ink that represent what's in front of me or what I can see on the photo. But even with the photo is really, I'm not trying to draw a photo. I'm trying to draw the reality that the photo is actually already a translation of. So when I copy from a photo, it's a translation of a translation. And if I'm not careful, I'll copy the faults of the photo translation into my drawing as well. And that's another thing I try and do if I draw from a photo. I've become more aware of, firstly, identifying the weaknesses of a photo, where a photo is not such a good translation of life. And then to retranslate that, not for faithfulness to the photo, but for faithfulness to the scene that was in front of the person taking the photo, if that makes sense. So all this goes on in my head, and I'm thinking, so what marks will work for creating this effect in this scene? And as I said, it involves outlines sometimes and it involves shapes, but it's more about trying to create effect. And so I find myself another drawing. Here it is. I did last week. Excuse me, leaving you for a second. Was this one. And if you look at those chimneys, I don't know if you can see, but the marks, I haven't done this kind of like outlining of the chimneys. I mean, I did do some very faint ink guidelines, so starting points, but I worked marks over them so that the marks I worked over those lines become the dominant lines, because these chimneys are bricks and the edges are not straight lines, smooth lines. The corners are not smooth, they're very weathered. And one of them is some distance away from the closer one. So I was trying to capture the effect of that, the feel of that, by finding marks that would do that, and outlining chimney shapes, outlining boxes seen in perspective was not going to achieve the feel of that. It might have represented in a generalized way the form, but not the feel. And yeah, and then the same with the foliage and the tree that's closest on the right-hand side and the tree that's further away on the left-hand side. I need different marks applied in different ways to give the meaning, if you like, of those trees, what the trees are like, how close they are, but maybe what sort of tree it is, what the lighting conditions are. These are all the meanings I'm trying to translate into ink on paper from a photo, which is, if you like, a translation from how it looks in reality. But again, if you look at just the way I'm thinking now and the techniques I'm using compared to 4 years ago, where it's all about outline. And some of you may prefer that, and it certainly has a nice clean look. But in some ways, it feels less real. It's more. It feels more like a stylized capture, like a simplified view. Whereas I'm trying to sort of find more um, actual kind of get the feeling of it rather than a summary of it, so to speak. And yet I've still got the same instrument that I used for both. So working out how to do that came from developing my understanding of the drawing process and of thinking of taking from a visual language of reality, perhaps via a photo, and translating it into the language that could be spoken by black ink from a fine liner or from a range of fine liners on a sheet of paper. So having that understanding of what I was doing and trying to capture a sense of a feeling of this is real, capture some of the qualities that happen when we see something in reality. Developing that, I think, is the biggest single reason why my drawing has developed and I think improved the way it has. If I want to go back and do something more outline based for any reason, I can. But because of my understanding development of my drawing process, I can actually do lots of other things as well. And I think I can achieve the result I'm personally aiming for and probably have always been aiming for better. So that's the big one for me. And I've got to say, thank you, everyone, because this really only happened for me because I'm having to put what I'm thinking into words to do voiceovers for my drawing demos for YouTube videos. And that pushed me to put into words for myself to make the videos that then I could listen to and more consciously apply it to every new reference I came across to draw. I, as I became more aware of what I was doing, it was easier to do and I was able to do it better. We have a question from Dude. I struggle with choosing where to start when drawing. How do you choose a starting point when sketching out and about? Look, it's the same as whether it's out and about or from a photo. I deliberately, when I began drawing from a photo freehand in ink, directly in ink, it was because we had this big, 3-month European trip planned in 2020, and you can imagine where that went, straight down the gurgler. Fortunately, we'd only paid the airfares for that. But and so I wanted to develop a drawing style from the photos, which was what I had, because I still wanted to draw the kind of the architecture, the European architecture that I so enjoyed when I was traveling over there. Where did that thought go? Architecture. Yeah, that I was consciously trying to draw from the photo in a way that would be suitable for sitting on location and drawing directly with a pen, drawing what's in front of me directly with a pen. So I have done a little bit of street sketching in Sydney between our lockdowns and getting COVID again and long COVID and other issues. But I have done some street sketching. That was, I was clearly in a very comfortable seat at sort of a lookout place doing that. But I have done a bit of, here's something a little more simplified. That was on this intersection. And all these semi-trailers were coming around this corner, and it looked like every one of them was gonna get me in the face. And but they were just swinging past. It was really quite nerve-wracking. um, so where I start is the place that will give me the best chance of starting accurately. So in a given scene, different parts are going to be more challenging. Now, because I'm only using pen, I can't erase any marks I put, which also means I can't afford to put any marks on the paper that can't be there at the end. And that drives the fact that every mark will be there at the end. That drives where I start, because I need to start in a place where I can eyeball the proportions, the height to width ratio, as simply as I can. And that's going to be invariably, in most cases, some a rectangle or square shaped, or almost rectangle or square shaped area, because it's just going to be easier to see the height to width ratio, and also to work out the scale. Am I drawing it, if I'm drawing from a photo, larger or smaller? If it's in life, how much of this scene do I want to fit on the sheet of paper that I'm drawing on? And therefore, how large will this little part of that scene in front of me have to be on the paper so that I get all of that scene? So I'm choosing the part that, in a sense, is simpler. And I'm also going very slowly at the start. Drawing has a rhythm, it has a tempo, or it certainly does the way I draw. And that's why I think it's ideal to always aim to draw in the one session. If your drawing's going to take 2 hours to draw and you don't have 2 hours, then do another drawing. Keep that till you've got 2 hours. If it's going to take 60 minutes to draw, then don't do it when you've only got 15 minutes and thinking I'll come back to it. Do a 15-minute drawing, because there is a wonderful rhythm. This is something I haven't, I think, ever made a video about, which I probably should. But there's a wonderful rhythm in a drawing session, from a slow start where you are kind of establishing things, and then as you consolidate a small amount as accurately and carefully drawn as you can, now you can build on that, and what you do now measures from what you've done, so you don't have to keep agonizing over, is this the right height? And for buildings especially, they go up and they can go across, and so once you've established the first up and the first across, you can now align with those. And even with other objects around the building, again, you've got the building now to help you determine the scale, the size you're going to draw this, and so forth. And and so the pace picks up. And also, for the way I draw, I invariably have a focal point, and it's usually, if possible, also something that is closer, because my initial marks are going to be a bit slower and heavier, and there'll be more ink and they'll stand out more at the end. And so for the way I draw, I want those sorts of ink effects to be in the focal point, where it's what's the periphery. I'm drawing that usually faster at the end, and so I can draw it really, really quick. I mean, if you look at this one, look at the trees on the left-hand side. That was the very last thing I drew, and, well, I'm very warmed up, I'm very confident, I know what I'm doing. Those marks are happening very quickly at the end, and I want them to, because I want that furthest tree to have a lighter, more distant, visually more distant feel than the one on the other side of the paper. And so it works well doing that at the end, when and because I've drawn the closer things with the heavier marks and the more detail, I can judge those marks really accurately first go. I'm not wondering, oh, is this light enough, or is it too heavy, or what? But I can work off what I've already done. Yeah, so that's how I do it. I mean, because I tend to draw similar subjects, it often means that I'm starting in a similar sort of place. But I've drawn buildings where I've actually started with the top of the tower, because it's because of the nature of the angle and overlapping objects, it's too difficult to start um, lower down. And in fact, for most buildings, I don't start at ground level because the ground level, particularly if we're doing urban sketching rather than kind of like a architectural statement of a draw of a building, there's lots of clutter. There's garbage bins and there's people, there's parked cars, there's maybe tables and chairs and bus stops and street sign poles and lights and everywhere. And those things are very hard to start with because we don't have a sense of scale established yet. So I need to establish the sense of relative sizes of one thing to another with something that's a major part of the drawing. Because if I start with a person on a street, chances are I'll draw them too large, and that'll mean that if the building's in scale, probably what I thought was going to fit on the paper won't. So all of these things cause me to start where I start. Please hit the like button if you're finding this interesting, and if you can't stay for the whole lot, I hope you find it again later and put it on in the background when you're doing the dishes and weeding the garden or going for a walk, whatever you do, walking the dog. So thanks, dude. Any other drawing questions that you want to ask me while you've got the chance, and I'll go on to my next point, second point. And this is the second one is simply frequency, the regularity with which I began to draw. And again, I got to thank the YouTube channel for that because, you know, some days I was just more wanting to make a video really than I wanted to draw, but I had to draw to make the video. And so I drew. And the hard thing for me, for all sorts of reasons, was starting to draw. And so having a reason to need a drawing that wasn't the drawing, just psychologically, it was a helpful workaround. It was sort of detouring around the blockage of it's hard to start because, well, it wasn't the drawing I wanted. It was this on the other side of the drawing that was the video. So, I just had to do it and not kind of get caught up in some of the headspace that was, I guess, all part of why I didn't do any art for 30 years. So yeah, frequency. We can't improve by thinking about it all the time. Now, equally, we can really benefit from thinking about it when we're not drawing. When we don't have the opportunity to draw, we can still think about drawing. We can think about process. We can look at things and think, how would I draw that? What marks could I use? We could take advantage of looking at things that other people have drawn and just think, okay, wow, gee, how they did the leaves, how they did the tiles on the roof, how they did those really far away things in so few marks. You know, let me really look hard at that. And then I don't recommend copying that. But when I go to draw something similar myself, remembering what they did and incorporating that in some way, at least in an experimental way, into my marks is a really powerful way to get the best of everyone's worlds. I need to make it my own. I need to bring their solutions to their drawing problems into my creative thinking to help work out my own drawing solutions to my drawing process. But thinking about things when we can't actually draw is not quite as good as drawing, but it's very, very good. When I did start painting after 30 years of running from it, I did have 20 years of sitting on a major Sydney motorway that took me from my house to work, looking in bumper to bumper traffic often, early morning, late afternoon when the sun's low in the sky, and looking at the sun going through the tree canopies and thinking, how would I paint that? The gum tree canopies that I love so much. And they're the things I started painting. And because I had been thinking about them for 20 years, sitting in the traffic, I became aware when I started to paint just how much that observation and thinking about it had helped me. It really gave me a head start than if I hadn't spent that time thinking, how would I paint that? How would anyone paint that? How would I paint that? And trying to imagine the colors and the paint, the brushstroke marks and so forth. So thinking about our drawing, and thinking about drawing in general, when we can't draw, very helpful, very helpful, but not helpful if that's all we do. We do have to put the ink on the paper or the whatever. So that's the second point. My third point is uh, third point is critique myself ruthlessly. Now, I say this with a little bit of caution because a lot of creative people, a lot of artists, graphic artists in particular, being too ruthless on ourselves is our problem. And so we only ever see what we've done wrong, and we take every chance we get to tell ourselves that we're no good and who are we kidding and everyone else is better and all of that. So I'm not saying that. And I had to work through some of those things myself, which is why I know it can be a big issue, can be an immobilizing issue for people. But let me tell you, we can move through that. Okay. It's another obstacle and not everyone faces it, but it's not a game changer. Not a game, but it does require of effort and intention and taking risks, but we can navigate that. And I do have some videos on that too. But when, particularly if I'm self-taught, if I'm not doing a course, if I don't have a teacher who sets the agenda and who marks my work, I have to do all the things a teacher does myself. I have to choose what materials I use. I have to choose when my lessons will be and how long they'll be and exactly what exercises I do. But I also have to mark my work. I have to do what a teacher would do. Look at it and say, look, this has worked well. I'm not sure what was happening here. And this, I don't think, says what you wanted it to say. It doesn't work in with the other parts of your drawing. And a teacher may say, look, I think you'd do well to draw this again. Or, oh, you've done really well with this. Here's something that builds on that, but it'll just push you in a little with a new thing. Or it's just the same, but a bit harder. Requires you to work at this now with what you've done here. I haven't got a teacher to say that. So I have to make those decisions myself. Or does it show so many problems that I actually perhaps didn't do some foundational things in the stage before well enough? I actually pushed on too quickly and I actually need to go back, or perhaps I need to repeat this and improve on this so that I don't have that problem in my next sort of place I go to with the drawing. So all of these things are things that I now have to do myself. And I have a number of videos on critiquing, on ways to look at our drawing and work out, have I done well enough to move on? Should I stay here? Should I go back? What sort of questions to ask? Ways little tricks that we can use to see our drawing with fresh eyes. Because part of the problem is that, especially for a drawing that's taken a long time, I've got so used to what I've drawn as I've been drawing it that things that aren't quite right and that anyone else would walk and say, oh, that doesn't look right, if they're honest. I've got used to seeing them the way I've drawn them. And so the problems don't seem as obvious to me because I've just, it's all become, oh yeah, this is how it looks. And the problem is if I keep accepting things that aren't right, particularly things like perspective and scale things, if I keep doing features on faces and the features are too large for the head, I get used to seeing that. And therefore I then can't see the problems later on. And I can do drawing after drawing after drawing after drawing that has the same fundamental weaknesses. And the more I do that, the harder it's going to be to break out of that. If I have a problem with anything that I'm drawing, so a perspective problem or a scale problem or other issues, as soon as I think that's not quite right, I want to bring my attention to that in my next drawing to really hit that on the head. Just threw my pen on the floor to really hit that on the head. And oh gosh, okay, 8:20. Yeah. I just looked at the clock. I'd been doing this for 44 minutes and 44 seconds. Um, yeah, I don't want to let that roll on because it will be harder to correct later. And if I try and correct it and I can't correct it, then I need more information. I need to kind of work it at understanding my problem more or working out how should it look. And if it's a perspective issue, then I may need to go back and actually study perspective more from a theoretical point of view. Or you can Google. I mean, I remember I was doing something and I needed to put a shadow on the ground from something, and I wasn't sure how to do it. I hadn't really had to do it, or I'd had a photo. Um, I think I'd rearranged the photo a bit, which is why I couldn't just do a straight copy of what was in the photo. So what did I do? I Googled and found a YouTube video on um, how to draw shadows in perspective. It's not hard. Once I know, there was no point in my just trying to guess. Um, if I hadn't had YouTube, if it was the olden days when I were a lad, I guess I would have gotten an object and gone outside and put it in the sun and looked to see how the shadows were cast at different times. I'd have done it through the day. I'd have got a sense of at least generally how it worked, and then tried to kind of introduce that into my drawing. It wouldn't be as good as being able to Google very precise information and find a video on that, but do that. I still do that. I Google, videos on issues where I think, "Oh, I'm just not sure, what how does it work? Why is it working that way?" So, yeah, um, maybe you did that with something and got one of my videos. Um, but working out what I've done wrong and what I need to find out to get it right has been an important part of my process. And hey, if the teacher's still having to learn and having to find what I need to know, then you probably do too if you're watching my videos to learn to draw. And hopefully my videos are a big part of that. But of course, you'll want to draw things I haven't drawn and do things I haven't done, which is fantastic. And yeah, but don't guess, because then we get used to thinking that our guesses are good enough. Okay. Um, all right. The next point, I've kind of touched on this one, but it's just that I really wanted to improve. I think maybe partly because I'd spent so much of my life like sort of running from this. And look, I was busy with work and family, and kids and wife and all those things, garden, all the things that mowing the lawn that we have to do. Um, but I could have squeezed in. I could have found little bits of time. I do drawings now in 10 minutes and 15 minutes. I could have done that 30 years ago. But um, but I think I did when I did start, there was this sense of I need to make up for lost time, not by rushing, but by making choices to put time and effort into it. And we have to want to be better. If my YouTube videos are going to improve, I have to want them to be better. I have to want to be a better teacher as well as a better artist, because those two things come together for me for these videos. But in terms of the art, I have to want my drawings to look better and not be thinking, oh, that's good enough, or simply because the person I live with said, oh, that's really good, maybe because they don't know enough to, see issues or see problems, or they just want to be encouraging. Um, I have to want to have better drawings, and particularly when I see issues that other people either don't see or don't think are important, I need to let my perception override perhaps their encouragement and enthusiasm. Think, no, I need to, yep, yep. Look, I look at this now and I can't unsee it. And I'm going to do another few drawings that are similar. So I get to work on this issue while it's fresh in my head and while it's kind of like, And sometimes I'll do something and then I'll go too far And I think, no, I need to pull back from that. That's now too cluttering or too, I tried to do too much at once too quickly, and I haven't got the balance right for my marks. And now my marks, instead of creating the scene, overwhelm the scene. A bit like when people try and draw all the bricks, and I don't mean really like top people doing it who spent years on the one drawing, um, but like just putting in too many lines, and the ink for the bricks overwhelms the building visually. It's easy to do things like that, but I have to see it and say, okay, my technique for bricks is not working. Simply doing the same thing over and over again will continue to not work for the same reason. I need to I need to be prepared to try and work out a better solution, a better way of capturing the effect of bricks, rather than just trying to draw them all with lines. So let's have a look. Desperate for a morning coffee, but I can hear my wife in the shower now, so it's a little way off. Hi there, Binky. Yep, we had a great few days in Amsterdam. What a beautiful city. I had no idea Amsterdam was going to be so beautiful. You're new here, so very curious. Well, I hope you're still here. Do I sketch every day to become better? Not every day, but a lot of days. Probably on average, every second day I would do a drawing. Some days I do 2 drawings in the one day, particularly if one of them is a fairly quick thing. So yeah, I mean, frequent drawing in itself won't make you better. You may just keep drawing the same problems over and over again. But frequent drawing with a mind that's looking to improve and a will that's wanting to improve will see you get better drawing, because you'll be doing these things I'm talking about. You'll finish a drawing and you'll be critiquing it, and you'll be finding the things. You'll be looking at this. In a sense, our last drawing is the foundation for our next one. And sometimes I'll do a drawing and I'll like the way it turned out so much, and even though I might be thinking it was half a fluke, I'll now do 2 or 3 or 4 drawings that are similar, so I can build on what I learned there. And sometimes in my next drawing, I take it too far and I feel like the effects don't work as well. And as I just mentioned, that they perhaps overwhelm what we're looking at. So it's a process, and learning to navigate the process is one of the skills. If we're learning to draw, we're not just learning the skill of drawing, we're learning the skill of learning. And for many of us, we haven't had to do that for a long time. And maybe when we were at school, we didn't do it very well then. And but just because we didn't have a good learning experience at school doesn't mean as an adult with the maturity and the life experience that we now have, that we can't revisit the learning space and do it better. Lots of kids, especially boys, just aren't ready to do boys don't always learn well in the way that schools are set up to process us through the learning factory. And sometimes we're just not ready, and we don't have the motivation, and there's too much else happening in our brain and in the world around us, and we're wanting naturally to develop in other ways. But 10, 20 years down the track, we've done a lot of that, and we've got a lot of stuff, and we have now a clearer picture of ourselves and what we're doing and why we're doing it and what we want to do and the skills we've developed already. And we're ready to do perhaps a more formalized process, learning. But we haven't learnt the skills of learning perhaps the way some people have. Well, we learn them now. We learn them with drawing. We learn them with something that we want to learn. But we realize that it's not just the draw it, but how we learn anything that is a skill that we need to pick up and consciously learn. So some of my videos deal with that. Hello from Spain. G'day, Conan, the librarian. Love the content. Yeah. Great. Spain's. I remember one day I was thinking, what's the European city, because I live in Sydney, what's the European city that's the same latitude as as Sydney, where the weather might be a bit the same, and the sunshine and all of that temperatures. And it was Madrid. Madrid is the sort of European city that comes closest to the. So Sydney would almost be in almost be in North Africa. If yeah, like it's funny, yeah, because we just have nothing. It's just the Southern Ocean for most of Europe, I think. Yeah, yeah. Oh well, you nighttime for you. Well, back home, it's morning time. It's 8:30 actually. Yep, pretty exactly. So that was the fourth point. The fifth point for why I've improved, I think, has been because I've not been afraid to experiment and to try things out and to take risks way more than I ever used to. And that's because, but that has flowed from my first point, if you missed it. My first point, why I think that the biggest reason my drawings improved over 4 years. And look, if you've just joined us, let me show you two drawings 4 years apart. This was one of my first YouTube drawing demo videos. Or maybe this was actually an Instagram one, but it was about the time I was starting the YouTube videos. So this is 2021, end of 2021, November 2021. So lots of good things about it. Nice, accurate in lots of ways, but very much a focus on outlining shapes and trying to draw all the lines for all the outlines. And so it gives a very clean finish, but it does have a bit of a cartoon feel, even though it also does in other ways feel realistic. So this was what I was aiming for my understanding of what I was doing at the time. 4 years later, this is the drawing I did on Friday, 2 days ago, of a street in Florence, and it's a much busier, mark-packed drawing, and a much wider range of marks. There are still lines, outline lines here and there, but they're not so obvious in the same way because my understanding of drawing has developed. Not the understanding of drawing, but my personal understanding of what I do when I draw, and therefore what I'm trying to achieve and the possibilities of achieving using the same material, a black fine liner pen, and a sheet of paper. So as my process changed and developed, my framework for understanding what I was doing and how I was going to do it developed. My drawing changed along with that. And as I said, I kind of thank YouTube videos for that, as in my YouTube videos, because normally for me, that probably would have been more intuitive. But because I was making videos, I had to put things into words. And that really helped me to focus on what I was doing and trying to do. And that then let me do it more intentionally. In some ways, I'd make the video and that would be like watching it myself. And then I'd be putting it into practice more in my next drawings. So I do know that my drawing method can certainly work for some people because it's worked for me. I've sort of taught myself with how I teach. Yeah. But that was the big reason I think my drawing has improved. That I've got this way of thinking. And the other key thing in my understanding the drawing process of finding marks to create effect was that process is a translation process, translating from one visual language to another. So yeah, please hit the like button if you're finding these thoughts of how, or experience of why I think my drawings improved and changed and developed over the last 4 years helpful. Please hit that like button for me. And but yeah, the fifth one, that I've been increasingly prepared to experiment and to try different things. And again, for some people, their personality, their problem with drawing ends up perhaps experimenting too much and doing too much too quickly, too different, and never actually having a place of consolidation. But for others of us, by nature, we're more timid and we're we're less likely to kind of do things different, and we feel that it's safer to do things the same because we want to make sure it works out, because somehow the feeling that it won't work out seems like overpowering, and we don't want that to happen. Um, and so we stay safe. We can't learn if we stay safe. Think of learning a language. You've got to just make take the risk of speaking the sounds that you think will create the meaning. If we want to learn to speak fluently in another language, we can't do it from a safe kind of cognitive place, which really ends up using our mother tongue as the framework, which means we're at best we'll always have an accent, and at worst we'll have a very broken rendition of the language we're trying to speak. You have to kind of just jump into the water and you know um, same with singing. You can't learn to sing if you don't commit to the note with everything you've got at some point, and trying to play it safe will actually mean it's impossible for you to get to that place vocally. Well, drawing is the same. As I said, the challenge with drawing is that at the end of the session I can still see my drawing, and if it doesn't look very good in my mind, because and the reason it doesn't look very good, let me tell you, is because I have the very wrong and unhelpful idea that I'm going to create an artwork, and that puts the pressure. And if I create an artwork, it can't have anything wrong because that spoils it. So if I have a drawing at the end of my drawing session and there's some things that aren't quite right, then I've wasted my time. Who am I kidding? I can't do anything with this. I don't want anyone to see it because then they'll think that I can't draw and I've ruined it. But if I'd been, instead of practicing drawing, if I'd been practicing the piano at the end of that practice session and someone walked in the room, there's nothing to see. They can't say, well, unless they heard my wrong notes from the other room, they're not going to say, oh, you messed that up, didn't you? Or why are you bothering? It's in the privacy of your practice session. But because the bit of paper is still there afterwards with something on it that someone can pick up, or most significantly, we can pick up ourselves and go, oh, okay, yeah. Somehow that puts pressure on us, which for some people is incredibly unhelpful. And so it's partly knowing ourselves and working out the way I can overcome these issues, for myself. And my final point, and I'm really happy to take any questions about drawing, any issues you have, anything you want to ask me about my drawing journey, or you want to reflect on it with yours, or if you're hit a blockage, if there's some skill you feel you can't develop, some next phase, or you're just not sure the best way to help yourself with where you're at now, please give me some info and I'll tell you, I'll give you my thoughts on it. But the other big thing I think that really helped me improve was that I have stayed in the one place with my drawing for the last 4 years. Not that I've stayed in the same way of drawing, but I'm still drawing freehand in ink, basically from photos or from life. I want my drawings to capture a sense of realism. I'm never drawing for photorealism, but I want when people to look at when they see my drawing to that it connects with looking at a real street or a real bushland scene or a real tree or something. And I've stayed in the same cluster of subjects, which is simply because they're the ones I like. So, I don't do portraits. I don't do like detailed figure drawings. I don't do animals because I don't want to. I'm more nothing against any of those things. Some of my best friends are people, but um, but I enjoy drawing the subjects I enjoy, and so I enjoy it. I enjoy the process of drawing more by drawing the things I love to see and to think about, and memories and all of that. Um, and so by keeping those things the same, I can experiment with all the other things. I can experiment with creating certain effects for those subjects. So when you've got closer trees and further trees, how do you what how do you, we change our marks to have that work out more? Um, or if it's a street that we have one end of the street closer than the other end of the street. Again, how do I simplify the details as we go from this end of the street to the far end of the street? And how does that change whether it's the windows above street level or if it's the street level clutter, if it's the people, the cars, the bus stops, the light posts, you know, how do we make that transition in a way that feels real, that captures the sense of realism that we want without overdrawing or oversimplifying or stylizing or just over inking so that all we see is black ink and we don't actually see any of the things that we've drawn because there's just too much black ink. By staying in the same subjects, I have the same issues over and over again, and that gives me practice. It lets me draw something and critique it, do that. I'm now the teacher marking my work. If I don't have a teacher, I'm the teacher marking my work and working out where are there problems, where do I need to work more at it, all of those things. Can I move on or should I stay in this place for a bit longer? By having the same sorts of subjects, it's just easier um, to identify the issues, to work on them, and to improve more quickly. And seeing improvement is incredibly important, I think, for most of us. Uh, have that encouragement that, hey, yeah, I may not be as good as I'd like to be, but I can see that I've moved. And I mean, yeah, when I first like compare after I've been drawing for a couple of years, and suddenly occurred to me I should go look at my earlier drawings because in my mind I could remember them, like I knew what I'd done, but I hadn't gone to the pile and had a look. And I thought, oh yeah, I remember being really happy with this when I drew it, but gosh, I only see problems now and thoughts like this. And it was nice to think that I'd actually developed. I do my glass. Maybe they need tightening. Um, yeah. Um, it was nice to think that, hey, I can see improvement. And when I began to think, how have things, and it was very helpful to compare an earlier drawing with a later one, and think how have things changed, because that let me see what had happened and work out, well, why has this changed? How has my thinking changed? And that let me focus my thinking more clearly, but also understand what that thinking had been. And now I could consciously kind of embrace the thinking and develop the thinking, and making the videos meant I had to keep putting what I was doing into words, which let me understand it more clearly and then let me adopt it more strongly and more emphatically in my next drawing. So it became this kind of self-sourcing pudding, as we say. Yeah, that kind of picked up momentum, and I think then as I started to draw, I yeah picked up momentum, and that then became encouraging. I could see more improvement as I drew, and even if some people preferred my earlier drawings for their perhaps more line-based quality and their simpler, cleaner look, that's great. But what I'm drawing now is more what I was trying to draw then, but I didn't have the language. I didn't have the mark making language to speak it onto the paper. Um, yes, yeah. Spain, if I draw shadow with lines, how do I know if the lines must horizontal or vertical or something else? Binky, I have a video on. It's the wrong question. Okay, there is no right answer. Okay. The direction of the lines for hatching, the correct answer is whatever direction and what, or maybe lots of directions on top of each other, whatever direction looks best for that drawing, for those things in that drawing. See, this is where it's there isn't a rule to learn and apply. It's an understanding of the possibilities that we can create with our pen, with our pen. And then when we have a possibility in the drawing in front of us, we think of all the possibilities and we choose the ones that will create the effect that we want. I have a video on, I think it's called 10 ways to use hatching, or 10 ways I use hatching. And because part of the problem is we think that hatching is just for shade and shadow. It's just to put shadow on the ground and to put shade on the back of an object. And that's because most of the videos that teach about hatching, they're the examples of what hatching is used for. And we have usually a box and a sphere and maybe even a cone or something, or a cylinder, and we put hatching lines on those, and they have a definite direction, and we feel like, okay, so there's a definite direction, and the hatching is for shade and shadow. I use hatching for at least 10 different purposes, and I found that as I came to understand all the ways I used hatching, I stopped thinking about what is the right direction. That just stopped being a problem. Used to be a problem for me too. And I began to, instead, I began to think, what effect am I trying to create? So here, I've got hatching on the wall. I've got hatching on the road. I've got hatching here on the driveway. I've got obviously hatching in the trees. I've got hatching on the gutter here. Now on the gutter, I've used my hatching to create a rounded edge on the gutter. Okay. We can actually use hatching to draw edges that we can't draw with a straight line, because a straight line or even a continuous line would have given sense of a hard, fairly sharp edge. But this gutter has a worn, rounded edge. And so by controlling my hatching lines and the direction I do them, I can create that edge. On the road here, I did the lines horizontally because I wanted to emphasize the horizontal surface. But I also have some slight curvature in them to represent the slight camber, the slight curvature on the road. And here, I've also curved the hatching lines, not here, here. I've curved the hatching lines to represent the fact that the ground is worn away down. I've got straighter lines on the wall but I've got them at an angle. And I've layered about 4 or 5 different layers of fine lines to create a light, even gray, darker value that's to represent that it's backlit. So it has a soft shade on it from where the sun is that's different to kind of the harder, brighter ones elsewhere. I use hatching to show where the canopy foliage is and so forth. But if you go to my channel and you Google and you go to the magnifying glass and you Google 10 ways to hatch, it should come up. It's the thumbnail's a bit different. It's sort of got a dark green background, but it's got 10 ways to something. Might be 10 ways I use hatching, or 10 different ways to use hatching. I think I even have a hatching playlist. So you could go to the hatching playlist and it'll be easier to find there. But I think that's the video that I think is if you're going to watch only one of my hatching videos, I think that's the most helpful one. Ironically, I've got a hatching video that's got, I don't know, I think it's 700,000 views or something, but it's like my first hatching video, and I don't think it's a very good one compared to my later hatching videos where I've learned a lot more about hatching, but it's the one the algorithm liked. So there you go. Yeah, yeah. Binky, great. Glad to have helped. G'day, Milka from Algeria. Do you think we should stay in sail drawing to improve our technique or change? I'm not sure what you mean, Milka, by sail drawing, SALE. Am I reading that right? Let me just bump up the brightness. I should have done that earlier. We should stay in sail drawing or improve our technique or change. Did you mean safe drawing? Look, we don't have to draw at all. So in a sense, we can do whatever we want. But I think from the fact that you've asked the question, I think you want to improve your drawing. I think, do you want me? I'll put a link. Are you asking for a link, John? I'll put a link in the video description when I finish. Okay? How's that? Good idea. I'll write it on my hand now so that I don't forget. Because the old memory ain't what it was, eh? Link there. Yeah, I'll do that. But I think the very fact that you're asking the question means that you are wanting to improve. So why not? Because you can. I may never draw as well as Leonardo da Vinci, but I can draw in a month's time better than I can draw now. As long as I've got the time and the motivation to kind of put into it, to look at it and to work it out, that's something I can do. Why wouldn't I want to? Look, I get that some people draw because it's a calming thing, and really they don't even look at what they finish. It's the process of drawing lines and shapes, and they're not trying to make it look like anything. It's the process, the experience of actually creating the marks in different ways that gives them some enjoyment, some benefit, some satisfaction, some feeling of advantage in their thinking for their day. So, and that's all fine. There are no rules. We don't have to do it at all. But if you want to improve, why not? Why not give it a go? But it will require change, because if it didn't require change, we would all automatically improve, and that doesn't happen. Some of my drawing students, I've asked them to show me a range of drawings, or I look at Instagram and I look at some accounts with drawings and I think, oh, there's some fundamental problems here. And there's hundreds of drawings and they go back years and they all have the same problems. And I think, it is such a shame, because clearly they want to draw well, and clearly they're being very consistent at what they're doing in lots of ways. But they're repeating the same issues over and over again. We don't have to improve. Practice does not make perfect. Practice can simply mean we make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Practice improves when it's informed practice, when we look at what we do and we critique it, we say, how can this be improved? And then we work out what we can change to lead us into that improvement for where we're trying to go. Milka, I mean, draw again and again and again, same draw till we're satisfied with it. Yeah, same drawing you wanted. I wouldn't draw the same drawing over and over and over and over and over and over again until it reaches some state of perfection, because I just think that's going to be soul destroying. But I do think there's a huge amount of benefit in redrawing a drawing that you could, when you finished it, you're dissatisfied with your drawing because you now can see, having gone through the experience of drawing it, you now can see things that you could have done better. I think that's a tremendously valuable learning opportunity, improvement opportunity, particularly if you can do it like, if the drawing took half an hour or 45 minutes and you've got another 45 minutes still in that day or morning or afternoon or night, and you can do it again, or even just do part of it. Maybe you haven't got time to do the whole drawing, but if it was the tree you really felt like you messed up, but you've got a better sense of how you might have drawn it, just draw that tree. But draw the tree using like the same size, so that you actually, because how we draw a tree will change according to how large our paper is, and even what pens we're using. But so keep it the same size, but just do the tree part if you haven't got time to do the whole drawing. But why not do the whole drawing, putting into practice what you've learned? Yeah. What there is no point in doing, though, is in going on to another drawing that requires the same skills that we haven't actually achieved in the drawing we've done. We should at least draw it, yeah. But like think of when we practice the piano. Not that I've ever learnt the piano, but I've listened to the kids do lessons years ago. But you repeat the same thing over and over again, and it's what you've done not quite right that actually leads you to get it right. I often talk about our mistakes as being our friends. We live in fear. Well, some of us live in fear of making mistakes for all sorts of weird psychological reasons. As if they prove that we're wasting our time, and that you know why did we think we could ever do this, and blah blah blah. And yet getting things wrong is a fundamental part of any learning process. Imagine learning the piano or learning to sing thinking I won't hit a wrong note. No one would think that. Learning to speak a foreign language thinking if I get a single word wrong, I'm wasting my time. No, it's part of learning. You get it wrong, it gets corrected, and you get it right the next time or the time after that. Drawing is no different, but we do need to know we've made a mistake. We do need to understand that something I've drawn is not taking my drawing to the place that I'd like it to be, and to identify it so we can correct it. So we do need to look at our work. But unlike a spoken language or a musical instrument or singing, we do have the both sometimes this challenge of being able to see our drawing afterwards, and look at it, that a singer doesn't have. They have to remember whether they got that sound right or wrong, or that word right or wrong if it's a language. But we can actually see very, gloriously painful detail what we did afterwards. But that means we can build on anything that's not quite right. Or maybe it's not so much that it's wrong, but we can just see ways we could do it better. We see ways that we can add to something. And I often find by the time I'm making the video and I'm watching, especially if it's a demo and I'm doing the voiceover, I can invariably see ways I could have done it better when I'm watching it now after an hour or so after I finish the actual drawing. And I'm thinking, oh man, if I'd done this, if I'd done that, I could have done that. I should have done a bit more hatching here, a little more contrast here. And sometimes I'll even go back and I'll adjust my drawing, often by improving the contrast, adding more hatching to get a darker value somewhere. So at least the thumbnail looks better than it would have looked, because doing the demo voiceover, I just get to see it again, and that lets me start to judge it as a teacher, mark it more precisely than perhaps I did before. Yeah. So please hit that like button if you haven't, and I will make that link, John, afterwards. Any more questions before we go? looks like I'll be having my cup of coffee after the live session, not during. Um, any more questions, or will we call it a day here? Just giving you a chance to think. Please hit that like button for me if you haven't already. Really appreciate that. And it's Monday morning for me, so my week has begun. I imagine it's Sunday night for a lot of you. And I never know what time it is in America, I guess, and it depends on which coast you're on. Europe's sort of, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 hours behind, depending on summertime here or there. Yes, it's a bit tricky. I was in California once, and I never knew what time it was in Australia. It was almost random. Yep. My pleasure. Okay, UK, Sunday, 11 p.m. Yep. Yes, I have a family member in the UK at the moment, so I'm a little more aware of UK time. All right, thank you very much. We'll call it quits here. So, yeah, hope you going to sleep, Pinky. Yeah, I think so. So if you're going to go off and draw now, fantastic. All the best with it. If you're off to sleep, sleep well, and hope tomorrow is a productive drawing day for you. And I hope it will be for me too. I'll see you next time. Bye.